So kind but dangerous. That's what I want to be. Yes, dangerous. Well, the Navy SEAL part helps me with that. But kind, well, that's a little bit different. I'm using a priming bias as well because I'm not saying dangerous but kind, because then it gets the wrong connotation. Kind, I'm soft at first. I can help people. I'm doing that because I know it's the right thing to do. I'm not nice. I'm not a nice guy. So these things that define me. I'm kind but dangerous. Yep, so I can help you.
So welcome to the Leadership Expedition podcast. I'm your host, Bob Markovich. Today I've got a guest, Dan Gonska. Dan, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Bob. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for jumping on the Leadership Expedition podcast. The whole idea behind this podcast is to identify jungle moments. Well, what's a jungle moment? My best example of a jungle moment is when I was actually in the jungle. I had an opportunity to do a solo hike over a mountain and do some snorkeling. The task at hand seemed like it was going to be awesome until I started walking into the jungle. And once I started walking into the jungle, all of a sudden I realized that last night, the compound that we were staying at, there was a jaguar. So the jaguars are around us. It was the Darien jungle in Panama. And Fer de Lances, they've got these dangerous snakes. And they tell you if you get bit by one of these snakes on this hike, make sure you come back because we have the antidote right here. I'm like, this is Panama. Why can't I take it with me? I know how to inject myself. So, before you step into the jungle, it's like, no big deal. And then you start getting, the mountain starts getting a little bit steeper. All of a sudden, the gravel becomes mud and, jungle's 100 degrees, 100% humidity. It becomes wet. Fixed ropes to help you get over this mountain. And all of a sudden I'm thinking, what am I doing? And I knew I wasn't going to stop, right? I'm going to fight through this. The obstacle becomes the way. And before I knew it, I became hyper focused, hyper aware of everything that was going on with me. I was present, right? Whoever would have thought that being scared out of your mind would actually put you in a state of presence. So the whole idea behind this podcast is to talk with people about jungle experiences that they had in life, in business, in work, with family, whatever. And how did you fight through it? So that's what we're going to chat about. But the first thing I want to do is get some background on you. Who is Dan Gonska? Where are you from? What'd you do growing up?
Sure. Yeah, I grew up in Ohio, Cleveland, West Side, and I'm actually right now in the room that I slept in as a kid. So I'm at my dad's office. He was kind enough to let me use his studio, and it's fun to look back and say swim team and all the things that I experienced as a young guy helped shape and prepare me for the things that I would experience as a Navy SEAL for 20 years in the military. And I have a family now. I've got 4 sons, 8 through 15, which is an adventure. Fortunately, I have a wonderful partner on that adventure, my wife of 21 years, and it's been a real joy to be back here in the Ohio area after having retired a few years ago.
So you slipped something in on us, right? You're Navy SEAL retired, and I love the fact that you mentioned swimming, because all the books that I've read and everything that I talk about or I hear about Navy SEALs, usually swimming is the one area that a lot of these guys have struggled with. So obviously that was a point that was a check mark in your box, huh?
Well, that would be the assumption, and it would be the typical assumption where we make the what of both of us. But what it actually boiled down to was swimming in a pool, which I got good at. Swimming through high school is different than when you look at the bottom of the ocean. You can't see any lines. So I actually got to depend on God even more, even in the one thing that I thought should be my strength, which was swimming. By the end of BUDS, you're doing a 2-mile ocean swim in 75 minutes, and when the waves are crashing over you and you're trying to swim in a straight line, really having that buddy there was the only thing that got me through those swims that I did pass.
So let's talk about what actually got you into the Navy SEALs. So what year did you graduate high school?
2000.
So this is 2000. This is way before a lot of these Navy SEAL authors, Navy SEAL training, Navy SEAL leadership actually came to the forefront. So what makes an 18-year-old Dan Gonska say, "I'm going to go become a Navy SEAL"?
Well, I think it would probably be the fact that everything that I had done in my life was somewhat unconventional. So I had gone to school at home all the way up until the time that I was 16, ended up in a small private school with 12 people in my class, and then switched even from that, moved out to California for a year and graduated as a class of one on my own in a home study program while working a couple jobs at the same time. So that fast forward to now I've come back to Ohio and I was interested in carpentry. Did a year and a half apprenticing under a guy who taught me many things that I've used to this day. And ultimately, that didn't end up working out. And I remembered, okay, that short period of time that I was in that school, one of those other 12 guys was like, yeah, I'm going to be a Green Beret. Okay, well, I'm going to be a Navy SEAL because I think they're better. And that was a thing that I ended up going back to. I really needed something that I could hang my hat on and say, yep, I've got a trident on my chest, and so now I must be a man.
So you graduated from high school in California?
I did. I did. I got a diploma, but it says from Opportunities for Learning and
What part of California?
Santa Clarita.
I have no idea where that is.
If you know where LA is, go an
I
hour
do.
north, and if you know where Six Flags is, that's where Santa Clarita is.
And what took you out there?
My mom had actually moved out there, so that was an interesting thing when you've had an amazing foundation as a young man with both parents in the home and 5 siblings, and then when you see that get split apart, it is a huge challenge. And so I did end up having some conflict with my dad as a teenager. And right now I'm looking at my 15-year-old saying, okay, I need to make sure that I keep those positives that my dad had and then push away the things that I used as my excuse to resist. But yes, so I moved out to California with my mom, and she was there for a short period of time. I graduated in that time, and then we both moved back here.
Okay, so you find yourself back in Cleveland, Ohio. You apprentice with a carpenter, and now Navy SEALs are cooler than Green Berets. You know, the funny thing is, I see your stuff behind you, the flag, and
Yeah.
what's that helmet?
So that's actually a second phase helmet from Buds. It's funny because I'm not here all the time, so when I come back, I'm like, oh yeah, Dad, I did give you that flag that I carried when I was overseas, and then also my second phase helmet. So on the side of it, you could kind of see it. It's got the class number, and then it's got my name. And when people ask me, well, what kept you from quitting? I'll say, well, there were two things. One was my faith and being able to reach out to God in all of the myriad of situations that they push you beyond what you think is possible. And then the second was on that helmet is my family name. And when you quit in Buds, you ring the bell and you say, hey, I'm done. This isn't for me. And then you take your helmet with your family's name on it and you put it next to all the other guys that had given up. And I was determined not to let my family name end up in that category.
All right, so you decide to go into the Navy. I mean, so did you just go and knock on the Navy recruiter's door? I mean, what was?
That actually was how it worked. There's a guy here in North Olmsted, and I went and talked to him. Said, hey, I want to be a Navy SEAL. How does that work? And he said, well, you sign a contract, and if you can pass this physical test, then you get an opportunity to go to Buds. The thing later on that I found out was that he should have also written in there, and you get a bonus for completing Buds if you have this contract. That I recognized when my friends and I finished Buds, and everybody said, hey, what are you going to do with your bonus? I'm like, bonus? Yeah, man, your $4,000 that you got for having it, and it was not in my contract. So that was one of those things too, where that shape. When we talk about leadership, each of these specific things that happened in my past shape my mindset as to what am I going to do as a leader. Well, I'm going to make sure that I check that paperwork and that the people who I am in charge of, whether it's transactionally like a recruiter or otherwise, I'm getting the maximum benefit for them that I can.
So did you, when you joined, you got sent to
Great Lakes.
Great Lakes? Talk about Great Lakes. The crazy thing is how many people are aware that Navy people go to Wisconsin? Is it Wisconsin? Is that where it's
Chicago.
at?
Basically
Chicago.
Chicago, yeah. I don't know. I think people, since it's only 1 or 2% of the population that serves, it's really not as well known as you might think. And so, yes, that was an interesting thing for me as an 18-year-old kid going to boot camp. But when you talk about a jungle situation, that was ultimately one of the first in my military career. Because as I had signed up, I had been in the delayed entry program for 6 months as they figured out paperwork and the timing sorted itself out. The day I was actually headed to boot camp was September 11th, 2001. I didn't end up making it to boot camp because that morning while I was waiting for that recruiter friend of mine to come and pick me up, my mom called from work and said, "Hey, you got to turn the TV. Something's going on." And in my mind, I had looked at the second plane hit the towers. I was like, "What the heck movie is this? Like, this can't be real." And ultimately, it was. And so that was one of those things when you look at it, you're like, "This was something that I could have never predicted would happen, or on that specific day for me." So a few days later, I actually got to boot camp in Great Lakes and was able to see things at a totally different. Like, to me, it was just normal that the guy that was greeting us off the bus, I was like, "Oh, this must be how they do it." He was wearing a full vest and a helmet and had an M19. Now, looking back, I know, okay, well, the force protection level had been raised to the point where that guy normally would have been in just a uniform, but it was so escalated. And so that was my introduction from civilian into military life.
So you started in September, starting to get cold. You're September, October, November. So you're training. How long is boot camp?
Boot camp's 2 months, and that was not a bad go of it, really. For me, and when I had thought about it, I was like, oh, this was kind of a beginning of leadership in the military, because ended up as a section leader. So you've got 100 or something people that you're going through boot camp with in your division, and they do like the military does. They divide everything up, and you say, all right, hey, this guy can actually get his stuff done that he's supposed to, and has a little bit of bandwidth left over to be able to help the people around him. Okay, hey, good job, Dan. You're in charge of this section of 6 guys. And so then I would helped out those 6 guys, and that was kind of like, I do enjoy this. Like, I like being able to help and encourage other people and give them the attention that they need in order to accomplish the task that is at hand.
So you're 18 years old. You're experiencing leadership. Is that the first time you experienced leadership? Did you have opportunities prior to that, or is that the first time that was like totally in your face? Hey, you're now a leader.
I think that was probably the first totally in my face one. I think because it's not on swim team, it's not like many other sports, at least that I was aware of. There wasn't like a swim captain that I fulfilled or something like that, where guys may get that in football or hockey or wrestling, whatever it might be.
Okay, so you graduate boot camp. Who comes and watch you graduate? What part of your family came up there to watch?
That's a fun one, actually. So my dad and mom and my girlfriend, now my wife of 20 plus years, and at the ceremony we practiced for it, and it was an interesting thing. You march through and then you stand in formation, and then they have a speaker. And 18-year-old me didn't understand, okay, we're waiting around and waiting around. We ended up standing there for 4 hours waiting for the speaker to show up. Kids in my division are blocking their legs out, standing there at parade rest, and they're passing out. I'm like, oh, okay. I figured out I could get a break each time that I carried one of my division mates to the back where they had the medical people to take care of them. So I was like, oh, another break. And by the second or third time, I had it down. It turns out it was some guy who I'd never heard of. It was like, oh, the speaker is Donald Rumsfeld. He'll be here when he's able to. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, it was the Secretary of Defense that was the speaker at my boot camp graduation. So yes, it was a fun thing to see my family there, parents, siblings, and my wonderful girlfriend at the time.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
so I mean, what do you remember anything from Rumsfeld's speech that carries over with you today?
I would love to say yes,
Hey.
but no, I honestly I don't. It is something that, again, these experiences help shape me into the way that I lead and communicate now. So, do I remember the core message of what he said that day? No, but I remember a lot of words being said.
Do you remember how it made you feel?
I think more than that, that graduation is like a public thing. And the feeling I absolutely remember from boot camp was they do over a 24-hour thing at the end of boot camp. And once you complete that, the whole time you're in boot camp, you wear a hat that says recruit. And on that final night, it's called battle stations. You go through, do all this interesting and challenging stuff. For me, it wasn't super challenging. It was more fun than some of the real challenges that I ended up getting to experience in Buds and beyond. But I was the proudest when during the end of that, they have a ceremony where they give you your Navy hat. So you take off your recruit hat and you put on your Navy hat, and then you are a sailor. And so that was the thing that I would say I remember most. And they played Proud to Be American. And I like literally got teary-eyed. 18-year-old patriotic me is like, yeah, I'm a sailor now. This is the first real sense of accomplishment in the military for me. So even though I had the SecDef come as the speaker at the ceremony, that feeling of patriotism and service was what I remember most.
So, all right, boot camp's over. What's the next step? How do you get from Chicago to San Diego?
Yeah, so then the next step for me, actually, since I had done carpentry, I told that recruiter, hey, I want to learn how to make stuff with metal. Because on a ship, you can't just say, okay, this part broke, we're going to go and buy one because you're in the middle of the ocean. So what they have is metal stock, and then they fabricate parts. So I was like, man, that sounds like a really cool thing. Well, that ends up being, with a little bit of engineering stuff and then the actual school, it's like 4 more months that I spent in Chicago. And that was through the winter. And I thought Cleveland winter was pretty cold, but Chicago winter was definitely colder. And additionally, they had a motivator program in Great Lakes. And that's a couple of guys from the Naval Special Warfare community who run prospective team guys or EOD or whoever else from the community through some physical fitness training sessions. And I'm trying to remember, it was, I think, 3:30 to 5:30, 3 days a week. And in those PT sessions, one of the things that stands out to me is getting to utilize the body of water that was nearby. So doing a base run and then ending up, I think it's Lake Superior, in January and February with shorts on, and remembering, I'm like, man, I've never felt water feel like razor blades just running across your skin the whole time. But that was one of the introductions too, and it's funny too because you go to when you do end up in San Diego, yeah, the Pacific doesn't ever get warm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go down to Florida and I'll be in the ocean, it'll be great. And it's not quite like that. So I finished up that school 4 months, and by April I ended up going out to San Diego to begin Buds.
So, I mean, when you were recruited, so you were on the Navy SEAL track, and you stayed on the Navy SEAL track. I mean, is that how that works, or?
Yep. So
Okay,
I
so
took a test in physical fitness test in boot camp, and then I think I probably did another one while I was in A school, is what they call it. And then after passing those, I cemented my opportunity to go and try out in San Diego.
So you get to San Diego and they give you a pair of UDTs. Then what?
Yeah, so those UDTs they actually gave me in Chicago, and I can remember wearing them when I was hitting the lake.
So you were already wearing them in Chicago.
Yeah, yeah. For PTs, I don't know, maybe 18-year-old me thought it was kind of cool to have them.
All right. So you show up on base in San Diego. I mean, do you have any downtime? Do you jump right into training? Well, let me ask you this first. So I guess you wouldn't be the first graduating class after 9/11 from Navy, but you were one of the first graduating classes from boot camp,
Hmm.
right? Okay.
Yes, we were.
All right. And then yeah, so talk about your arrival in San Diego. You already experienced California, although San Diego, California is a little bit different than, an hour north of LA. And
Yep.
you said, yeah. So what's this kid from Cleveland? What's going through your mind?
So it's funny looking back on it. What you said earlier was absolutely correct. There weren't books, there weren't podcasts, there wasn't all this YouTube stuff in order for me to have any idea. The thing that I had heard was just rumor mill from another guy who's like, "Yeah, man, you run 6 miles every day just to be able to eat. It's a mile in the sand to the chow hall, and you have to run back, and you do that at least 3 times a day on top of everything else." So in my mind, I'm like, "Man, I am not good at running. That's not my thing. I wasn't track and field guy. I was the swimming guy." And so it's like many other things in life that when we don't know, and we start getting in this loop in our own mind of building things up to be worse than they are. Okay, yes, it was the reality. The chow hall was a mile away, and you did have to run partway in the sand. But yeah, showing up there as 18, 19-year-old me, I guess at that point, in my blues dress uniform, Dan Gonska reporting for duty. Like, okay, here's your room, here's your 3 roommates, and we'll start in doc in, I don't know, a week or something. And so we did have the weekends off, and it was interesting to be out there on my own. But yeah, it was not something that I had any idea really what it entailed. Like, I hadn't even seen the movie Navy SEALs. A lot of guys reference that, but that was like, I hadn't even seen that stuff.
So that's a jungle moment right there, because you're going somewhere that you're not aware of, right? You haven't, maybe you saw a picture or two, but we know nothing about Navy SEALs at this point in time, or relatively little. And all of a sudden you're starting to hear, you're in your, like you said, in your own mind, you're creating barriers in your own mind. Right. I'm sitting here thinking that I can't eat chow and then run a mile. I can't do that. Of course, I'm 62 now, so maybe at 18 I could have. I don't know that I would desire to do eat and then run. So you're painting these pictures in your mind right now, and your mindset is becoming stabilized based on what you think is going to happen. So how do you separate the assumption, right? We assume,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden it's reality. You wake up that first day where you're officially in buds. How did your mindset evaluate the program?
I would say that they started explaining things to us when we got there, and they in doc was something new. I think it's been a mainstay for a long time now. So start the 3 phases of buds are first, second, and third. First phase is where you have the majority of guys decide that it's not for them, and in doc is okay. You do 4 to 6 weeks or something of, hey, these are the types of things that you're going to be doing when you start buds here in another month, and you need to get used to them. There were guys that during indoc were like, nah, this isn't for me. And so, on having those key things in my mind that I talked about earlier, my faith to be able to reach out to God and say, this is beyond me. I need some help. Give me the strength to get through this. And then, whatever motivating factors you had, then at that point, too, I was starting to talk to guys because they'll have guys that are rolled back or that went to the fleet after having decided not to continue in the past, and now they're back. And I had one of those guys who had made it through some portion of it, and he was in my boat crew for a little bit in Indoc. And so he was kind of talking through things, and he was saying, hey, this is how I did it last time, and then this is what it was like for me in the fleet. The fleet is important, but it is not what I signed up. What me is Dan Gonska. I didn't sign up for that. And so listening to this guy talking about it, I was like, no, I don't want to go through what this guy did and be put behind by 2 years before I get another opportunity to try this again. And so I had to that was one of those additional factors in my mind of, okay, yeah, I've got to make sure that I'm giving it everything that I've got in this moment.
Yeah, I like this whole thought here, right? Because the people that I talk to, it's again these jungle moments, right? Marcus Aurelius says the obstacle becomes the way, right? You're a man of faith. James in the Bible, James chapter 1 verse 2 says, "Consider it a great joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you go through any struggle." That's going to help. This is my version. Not new. This is my version. Consider it a great joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you go through these various trials. It's going to increase your faith. But the key is the next verse where it says you'll be whole, complete, lacking nothing. So going through these trials is going to make us the person that we were created to be, right? We're being transformed, right? There's so many times that I have conversations with people that they come to that obstacle and they back away. So here's an example of somebody that for some reason came to an obstacle and hung it up, put his helmet, rang the bell. He's done. And here he is. You said 2 years later,
Mm-hmm.
2 years later, you can only imagine the agony that he was going through for 2 years, wondering if he's going to get another opportunity to do that, right? Does this all make sense? Does it?
It definitely does. And the tragic part about it is I think that once you've allowed yourself to fail or to say, all right, this is something that I am accepting, he actually quit again. The first day that we started first phase, that same guy was like, yep, I know what's coming. I'm done. And it was a temporary thing that one of our mutual friends told me. He said it was a temporary thing that he did in order to get some time away from the jungle, or I guess it would be the zoo of the fleet. Being in a very rigid thing. I mean, you've got job security. You're going to be doing this thing day in and day out. It was a choice that he made to get into it, and then he made that choice a second time in order to not go down the path that he could have as a Navy SEAL, and instead finish out at least the rest of that enlistment in the Navy, just in the fleet.
Yeah, this is all important stuff. So there's a book. Angela Duckworth wrote a book called Grit. It's an awesome book, and I think you took the grit assessment yesterday, didn't you? I think you scored out at like a 4.5 out of 5, which is pretty amazing. I think that whole being, I'm going to give an example. And again, this is nothing compared to anything that a Navy SEAL goes through. But about a week ago, I was on my regularly scheduled 5-mile run. I shouldn't say that because the day that my 5-mile run was supposed to happen, I wasn't able to do it. My boys gave me grief about it. And my second oldest son said, what would David Goggins say? And I kind of, so the next day I had to go out and do my 5-mile run. And I didn't do it where I normally do it. I did it. So I was taking myself out of my comfort zone. I thought it was going to be easier where I wanted to do it. I started off, the first 2 miles was going to be on blacktop. It was 97, 96 degrees outside. It wasn't a smart thing to do. When I run by myself, I wear ear pods, I listen to music, right? It helps me get motivated. So the first mile in, I realized that my watch stopped working. I'm not recording my distances. I'm not recording my times. And my 5 mile runs are always timed runs, right? I've got a goal to hit. And I'm like, I got to fight through this. Again, it's a jungle second. It's not really a jungle, but you got to overcome it. And then my ear pod stopped working. I couldn't listen to music anymore. And because I know this path, I'm 2 miles in, I'm beat. I wore a hat. The hat was black. Stupid decision to make. I'm sweating. I'm hot. I take the hat off. I'm trying to cool off. And finally, I go into the woods, right? So I'm trail running in the woods, and I'm 2.5 miles in. I'm like, I quit. I quit. I'm done. I can't. I'm exhausted. And I actually started walking, and I said, well, maybe if I get some energy here, I won't quit. And I literally turned around and took 2 steps or 3 steps toward my car. I'm like, there's no way that I'm quitting. There's just absolutely no way. If I have to walk 5 miles, I'm going to walk 5 miles, right? So it's David Goggins ringing in my ear, you know, don't quit until you're done. Don't quit until you're done. My done was 5 miles.
Mhm.
So I, you know, again, it's an experience that I had during the course of a day, and I fought through it. I fought through it. I did the 5 miles. It took me about 20% longer than it normally does, but I did it. I was exhausted for 2 days. I'm 62 years old, training in the heat. I love doing that, but I didn't give up. And I can only imagine, had I given up, the next time it would have been easier, right? Much to your point.
Yeah, yeah. And I think too, so many times of late, I've started running without headphones in order to be able to hear my own thoughts. And stuff will come to me in those times. Now, I think back then, yes, it was the way things are set up is to make them gradual and at the same time make them so extreme that you have to go past what you are think you're capable of. So you pushed yourself past that point where you're like, no, I'm done. The funny thing that I like talking about is while I was in Chicago, I was like maybe middle of the pack with all these guys. There are lots of guys that are getting ready to go to buds. So those early morning PTs, before we even go to two buds, they're having us do all this stuff, 100 pull-ups or whatever, running and swimming, and I'm looking around. I'm like, man, these guys are studs. They're winning all the races. I never won a single race. I was just hanging on, doing my best. When you get to buds, they have the time to be able to put you past where you'd go in an hour, hour and a half on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They're there in shifts. And that's basically like life. When you're a kid and you're in high school, you're learning these things. They're challenging. They can be shaping you. But it's not 24 hours a day. When you get to buds, some of the first people to quit were those guys who were the top looking athletes during those PTs in Chicago. And I think the reason that might be is because when they looked at it, they're like, oh yeah, I'm used to winning. I need to do what is prescribed and then I'll take a break. For me, it was like, okay, this sucks. The whole time I was in Chicago, just getting absolutely trampled. And then you get to buds and you're like, man, this is really pretty rough. But for me, it's Tuesday. It's not any different. I'm still just grinding it out. Whereas guys who are used to succeeding majority of the times, and that's where I think it can be a double-edged sword. Okay, you're the biggest fish in the small pond. You get to that big pond. Okay, now the challenges are bigger, and you can get swallowed up by them a lot easier.
That is, I mean, I'm sitting here trying to take all of that in, because you've said a lot. You've said a lot, and you started out with, you're running now without earbuds because you want to hear your thoughts. You want to be present, right?
Hmm.
And that when we started this conversation, that's the whole idea of, when I went into the jungle, all of a sudden I started being present. I noticed things that I'd never noticed before. I noticed my breathing. I noticed that going up this mountain, there's this orange thing in the side of the mountain. It turned out to be a crab. Why is there a crab on the mountain? Something that if I wasn't present, I never would have noticed, right?
Right.
And so your mindset in buds, I would assume that you were fighting to be present, because is that true? Were you fighting to be present?
I think so, and I think the fighting to be present then is not be in the future. Because if you look at the future from the beginning of buds, it's like this is totally overwhelming. I can't think of doing this run 5 minutes faster than I can barely do it now, or do another 30% of pull ups, or whatever the heck the challenge is. When you put yourself forward in time and trying to work out all those things that you're going to face, one, you don't recognize what's going on around you, but two, it's overwhelming. So taking things and some of the instructors were good about it, and they would say, hey, look, you need to be able to just get through the next 10 minutes or the next thing that you're doing, the next step you're taking. And so when you break things down to that level, you are present. Like I could see each time my foot was hitting the ground. Okay, and then I'd look just a little bit ahead and say, I'm not going to stop until I get to that landmark that's 20 feet ahead. And then you do that 1,000 times in a row, and you've completed whatever the long distance run was that you were supposed to.
Yeah. So here's what I'm drawn to, right? All of a sudden you have this kid that was, the captain of the football team, won a state championship, best athlete on the team, ran the 100 in track and field, threw the shot put, just this total stud athlete that is waiting to win, I would say, right? You characterize your life as waiting to win. You're waiting to win. Interesting thing. My wife and I went out to dinner yesterday at this local place, and it's a restaurant inside a training facility. It's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
T3 is the name of the company, and we're watching these high caliber volleyball players. Right, these are kids that were probably the best volleyball females that were the best volleyball players on their team. They're playing on a national team. They are waiting to win. All of a sudden, right? Because now how I put that is on purpose, waiting to win. You're thinking of the future, right? Waiting to win. I'm going to win. It happens because I do win. And they may have a good attitude and they may be gritty, but they know that they're going to come out the winner.
Yep.
Now all of a sudden, you go to buds and you're running in sand. You've never done that before. You're running, you get in that surf in San Diego, which is 54 degrees or whatever it is, that I may be making it warmer than it really is. And then all of a sudden you're waiting to win, but winning means, being halfway buried in the mud pits the last day of hell day, hell night, whatever you guys call it,
Wait,
and
yeah.
hell week. And they're looking forward to that to win. They're not looking forward to, they're not being present.
Yeah. And I think the challenge there is it's designed to not let you win. Like it's just there's more. So whatever peak you think you hit, it's just a plateau before they take you up another notch. And so those guys could win, and that was one of those things too for Hell Week, like you said. So Hell Week, you get 5 days straight, no sleep, and you're doing physical activity the entire time. So you're carrying a boat on your head, you're carrying a log, you're running around, doing the mud pits, whatever it is. The mantra is it pays to be a winner. So that means you might get a sliver of a break if you're first. Well, I had the unenviable opportunity to be in the Smurf crew, which is everything is by height because I don't want Bob, who's 6 inches taller than me, in my boat crew because then he's going to be carrying all the weight on his head. It ended up being a benefit to me. So even though they say, hey, look, if you guys are at the back, you're losing. So you've got 10 boat crews, everybody's running as fast as they can, given what's going on. And If you're the last boat crew, then you're going to be doing, instead of carrying the boat on your head, they call it extended arms. So you're pushing the boat up with your arms the whole time. We basically did the entirety of Hell Week at extended arm because we didn't win a single race. But we had a team that was close enough and that was determined enough that nobody in my boat crew quit. And since we're at the bottom of the height line, there wasn't anybody filtering in or out from the other sides. So I ended up getting to do Hell Week with the same 6 or 7 guys the whole time. And so when you have that mindset of, okay, I'm going to block it out, the ringing of the bell was going on throughout Hell Week. There was one point when I saw an instructor doing it. And that was the one thing that I was like, all right, it's just the instructor ringing the bell. It's not somebody actually quitting. I'm not quitting. None of the guys around me are quitting. And so I started drawing strength from that. And then by the end of Hell Week, I looked around and those same guys were there. And it was such a huge blessing to have that team. It went wherever it went after that, and guys performed at different levels. But in that moment, for those 5 days, we were that strength that we needed to be for each other.
So you're saying teams, right? And everything that I hear about Navy SEALs, they always talk about the team in the teams. You're part of the teams. You're part of the, right. So the brotherhood of the SEALs is the teams. So that's indoctrinated into you. I mean, so how do you call on the energy of others to the point where, the team helps you survive? The team is what, assists you in your endeavor.
I would say it is for yourself, knowing that you cannot stop, you cannot quit, because those guys are depending on you, and then you're expecting that out of them. And so then it's a positively, mutually supporting thing. So I can't give up because these other guys that are with me are depending on me. It is a team. The minimum thing that you would do is with a swim buddy. And so you have that guy that no matter what, if something goes wrong with him, you're there. And you can count on him for the same thing in reverse. And so I think that is really where you're drawing that strength to do what you know you're required to for that guy that's next to you. It's not about everything else that's going on out there. Even though you're aware of the situation, it's, okay, I'm present here with my swim buddy and making sure that I'm doing the things that I need to for the two of us. And then that ends up feeding into the bigger mission as a whole.
So I've heard stories, talked with a few other Navy SEALs, and I always ask about locking arms in the surf in San Diego. Why is that important?
One, because it makes it so that you can't stop the water from going up your nose. So you can't protect yourself. It gives you a sense of vulnerability. Like, you're locked arms here, you're not going to be able to reach up and block. And then you sit and you face the surf, and the wave, that salt water crashes over you. And once you get all of it out of your nose, you say, I can smell much better now. And it cleans you out. That's the one positive of it. But really it is, okay, now we're going to test what you've got going on in your head by introducing this stressor, because you can stand there and let a wave hit you. But when you're rocking backwards, and now it's not just salt water, it's also sand, because you're sitting in it and it's getting kicked up and it's going everywhere and it's just misery. I think it's one of those things that they use as misery. Then, like you said, the temperature of the water factors in, and you've got everybody's jackhammering because you're freezing. And then you start to develop, okay, well, what do I do in this moment? Because some guys will just be there and they'll be like, and the guys around him are like, dude, be quiet. Like, it's typically only 1 or 2 guys, but it's one of those things where it's like, dude, we're all feeling this same thing. Just suffer in silence. We're here together. Don't let go. And that's the linking arms is really, I guess, somewhat of a metaphor for being a team that can't be broken. Because you've got a line of 40 people, but you're all linked, arm to arm, holding on for dear life in one of the most miserable situations you could imagine. And it's testing you. You get to sit there. Definitely don't have your headphones on while you're sitting there, arms linked in the surf zone, and you get to work on your thoughts and find out what it is it takes to actually motivate you to continue.
Does sitting in the surf, does that help you get ready for sitting in the mud pits? Does that?
The mud pits, I think, is more of a, if you could imagine something where there's constant resistance, that's what the mud pits are to me. Like something that just totally envelops you. You're already completely exhausted, and now every movement that you make is resisted. And you just trudge on, step after step, maybe even crawl after crawl. It's one of those things where, okay, water, I can move through. The mud, it just, and then you come back, and even coming back, it's resisting you. Every direction you go, it resists you.
You know, the as I'm sitting here, you know, I've got all these thoughts running through my head right now. And so here you are getting all sandy in your UDTs that are, you know, 3-inch inseams or whatever, you know, they're short. You get all this sand inside and all of a sudden you have to start running. And maybe I don't know, maybe all of a sudden the running doesn't hurt as bad as the abrasion hurts. So now you're running with this gritty sand up against your flesh, and and all of a sudden you have something else to think about.
You absolutely do. And I think that's the sand can be analogized somewhat to in daily life, the things that we just have to deal with. It's there, it's grinding on you. And for me, by the time I finished Hell Week, because you're right, it does, it gets into all your, and you're wearing, in Hell Week, you're wearing full camis the whole time. So you're wearing pants, boots, and a cami top, and then a life jacket on top of that. The life jacket catches the sand right here, underneath your arms, around your waistline, on the backs of your knees, and your groin. It's just like having sandpaper in all of those areas. So by the time I finished Hell Week, it was comical. I don't have any pictures of it because it was before the digital picture days back then. But I looked like I took my shorts off and I looked like I was wearing a belt because it had chafed the skin so badly. And what you're saying is absolutely right. You know how it feels when you've got a cut on your hand and you get it in salt water. It stings. Well, the worst was going back into the water because every one of those on the backs of my knees, my groin, my waistline, under my arms, all around my neck was so chafed that I just had all these huge open spots. And they're doing medical checks on you periodically throughout to make sure that you're not getting an infection in these. But yeah, the sand is everywhere and it's grinding on you constantly.
Now, isn't there a fairly long swim during Hell Week too, where you have to go into San Diego Bay? Is that
So the big thing that you do in the bay, I don't remember if there was a swim that I did, but we did an evolution called Around the World. And that was where you take the boats and you start down at the mud flats and you paddle all the way around the entirety of Coronado Island. So you go through the bay and then out into the actual ocean and then back around to the Buds compound. And that was the one evolution where we actually came in second place. And the Jolly Greens, all the tallest guys were of course there sleeping underneath their boat when we showed up in our half deflated boat, but we did make it.
that's a long paddle.
Yeah, we definitely started in the dark and ended up it was daylight by the time we got there.
So you're going around Coronado and you're coming out. Do you go north and then you start from the mud flats? Do you go north? Is that the direction?
North underneath the San Diego Bridge and then out into the bay and then out into the actual open ocean.
Okay, so now all of a sudden you're coming out of the bay, going into the ocean, right? We know that it's the ocean. We know that the waves are big. So how do you navigate? I mean, here's another thing, right? You're first of all you're exhausted, right? You're in the middle. You're in the process of going through Hell Week. You haven't slept. You're in somewhat flat water inside the bay, and then all of a sudden now here comes the waves of the ocean. How does that how does
I would say it really becomes an issue once you're finishing and you're in the surf zone. So the surf zone, you've got a limited area between where the actual beach is and where the waves begin. So as the ground comes up towards the beach, that's where the waves will actually crash. When you're doing a timed swim, you swim out through the surf zone and then do the swim far enough out that you're not getting the waves crashing on you. So by the time we got out to the open ocean, you're riding the tops of the waves and you can tell, okay, we're not in the bay anymore. It's not flat. But at the same time, it's somewhat of a relief because you're like, all right, we're around. We can see North Island, the naval base there, and that means that we've got to be getting closer to where we need to actually finish this race at. And so the whole time you're navigating along the coast. So when you're looking for where is the thing that I have as a reference, you never end up going far enough out that you can't see where the land is. So you say, all right, I'm keeping the land on my left, and you go all the way around, and then it is a challenge. It's in that those last moments when you're talking to the rest of the boat crew, you're like, guys, we finally made it. See the Jolly Green sleeping on the beach. Hey, we aren't last finally, but we still have to make it through the surf zone in order to get on the beach in one piece. And it's a matter of timing things out to where, all right, we're getting, there goes the wave, get on the back of it as best you can, and then ride it in, making sure everybody's paddling at the same time so you don't turn sideways and get barrel rolled in the surf, and then somebody loses their paddle, and then it's this whole thing. And so, yes, as tired as we were and exhausted, it's seeing that finish line and rallying each other and saying, all right, let's get it over the finish line in spite of this turbulence at the very end, land the boat on the beach, and actually get 2 seconds of potential rest before we start getting hammered again.
so okay, let's go back to the beginning of Buds. How many people were with you at the beginning? Do you remember?
I think when we started Indoc, it was something like 200. And
Okay.
by the end, so they do something called rolling back. And so if you're injured or if you're waiting to come and had failed in evolution too many times, you'd get rolled back. But not counting rollbacks, we had 15 guys that were in the graduating class that originally started with us.
So starting out with 200 down to 15, that's 7.5%.
Yeah, it was pretty low. And granted, we did have 40 something guys that graduated, but it was guys that had rolled back or were in there for whatever reason.
So you didn't get rolled back, right? You completed it in one shot. Is that what happened?
But by the grace of God, yes, I made it through Buds on the first try.
So this might not be a fair question, but you know guys that got rolled back and then ended up graduating. We talked about one that got rolled or actually quit. I don't know if that would be called being rolled back, but went with the fleet, came back and ended up quitting again. What does it take for that person, that got rolled back to start from the beginning again and actually, I mean, actually fight through? What does it take?
So to me, I think that takes probably even more grit than it does to take it just as that first offering. And so I was fortunate. One of the guys who, my first team was SEAL Team 3 on the West Coast when I graduated. And the guy who I worked for in my platoon, they say, okay, you've got a specific task that you do in your platoon. He was the ordnance guy, and they call it your sea daddy. It's basically a mentor in the platoon. So he's the older guy. He's done a couple rotations, knows the things. You're the brand new guy. Okay, work with your mentor. So my mentor, he went by RL, but he actually did buds 3 times. And so it was injury partway through the first time, and then something else happened the second time in third phase. So you've made it 5 out of the 6 months. And he still had the tenacity to go back and do it again. And then I was blessed by the fact that I then got to have him as my mentor. A lot of the leadership things that I developed early on were because it was him who was my mentor. So to answer your question, it takes a lot to be able to regroup and go back at it, even after having what seems like, to you in that moment, it can seem like a catastrophic failure. Like this is the end of the world, and you could catastrophize it and then put yourself in that downward spiral and then not be able to execute. I don't know, maybe we'll get to it in a little bit, but I may have done that at some point in my career beyond buds. But he had overcome those past hurdles and gone back at it, even knowing full well how much of a total kick in the junk it was going to really be.
So, at this point, I think we got to point out that failure is an event. It's not an individual, right? Failure is an event. And it's so, for a guy like me, it's hard for me to separate that, right? How do I separate myself from the event? So I typically, my mindset goes to, Bob, you suck, right? You weren't able to do this, but it's as we grow and as we learn and as we stretch and stress ourselves, we've got to understand that failure is just part of the game, right? It's part of the process. I mean, if we won everything, again, we'd be looking for the victory.
Waiting to win.
So, what's that?
Waiting to win.
Waiting to win, exactly. And so I think that's a thought that everybody needs to carry with them. And here's the thing too, right? I mean, if you fail at something, in reality, how many people really look down at you, right? I don't think many. I think that for the most part, people are more worried about themselves than they're worried about you. And I think that when we have this mindset of, hey, I failed, we're worried about ourselves and what we look like rather than what the true obstacle really is, right?
I agree. And I think that is because, and I've been on both sides of this, so I can speak to it. The one side of it was the young me looking at guys who quit and calling them quitters. So I tell my kids, no, you're not calling your brother a liar. He's not a liar. He may have lied in this situation. We're not labeling him as a liar. He's not lazy. He is maybe not doing exactly what he should be with his time right now. Me doing that very thing as a younger self, saying, oh yeah, so-and-so, yeah, he was a quitter. Bud's quitter. That was something that we talked about a lot. Having a better perspective on it as I matured and talking to hundreds and hundreds of people, that 7% that you mentioned earlier, that's probably the people who I've talked to that were like, yes, I went to buds and didn't make it. Versus the number of people that said, I thought about doing that. Well, I am going to give a lot more credit to, now that I'm mature enough to say, okay, this guy at least had the wherewithal to go and try and didn't make it. Yes, failure is a part of life. That I know so many guys too that I've talked to that said, yes, I went to buds, didn't make it, and now here's where I am. And they've been very successful in doing something else. And I'm more proud of the fact that they tried, had a failure in that they didn't do that specific thing, and then kept on going and are successful in so many other realms or arenas.
I always think of the last person that finishes a 5K, the last person that comes across that line. And I'm more proud of those people than I am of the person that finished first. I had a conversation in November with the person that was last. There's about 1,000 people. We engaged in a conversation, and my comment was, "You finished at this number, but what about the 7 billion people that didn't even get out of bed to go for a run today?
Yeah.
What about that? You finished ahead of them." Right? And it's so encouraging seeing people that are battling through to finish a 5K.
Hmm.
You know, it really it says something about their character. They didn't give up. It says something about their grit. It says something about their determination. It says something about their courage. You know, imagine knowing, and you know because the ambulance is right behind you, right? In the 5K, crossing the finish line and knowing that you were the last person to finish that race today. But it's such an accomplishment.
Yeah, I agree, and that's where I have. So I've been humbled, and I guess I'll talk about that right now. So buds, I did make it through. I made it through the first couple rotations, couple deployments, and then I went to the East Coast and screened to go to Dev Group. And during that screening, I didn't make it. And so they have a selection course, and it's not just don't quit. It's okay, you've got a reputation, you've worked in the community, we know you're not going to quit, but now you need to actually be able to perform everything that we're telling you at a higher level. And for me, in that moment, it was the most devastating thing. Like, I had gone there, I'd moved from San Diego to Virginia Beach with my wife, and now what? I started internalizing that before I had fully been rejected by the instructors. It was like, man, I'm not doing as well as I should be. And then it was internalizing that failure. Well, I'm failing. I am a failure. This is gonna, and then it ends up materializing. So whether or not there was anybody in the background that was orchestrating something because they didn't like me because I looked like I was 12 years old, and that stuff is beside the point. Ultimately, it was God shaping me for the future, saying, "Hey, good job. It seems like you might have forgotten that I was the one who helped you through all of these other things that you didn't have a failure in. So now take some time and think about this while you wait for another year to go back to selection." During that year, I think I really matured and started to appreciate everything that was going on around me. It slowed me down, like you're talking about when we said, hey, take the headphones out, be hyper aware. I was then aware of there's 1,000 other people that are supporting the thing that the cool Navy SEALs are doing. And I got to know a lot of those people and begin to value them for their contribution. So people will say, well, the Navy SEALs, they do all this cool stuff. Yes, but they're just a small component, albeit a hard-earned one. But when I did go back and lead in the selection course in my class the second time, I was able to reach out to all of these people. And even one of my best friends, Billy Sangster, that he's an EOD guy, I met him while I was waiting to go back to selection. And he and I deployed together, our families, our friends, our kids as well. And there are so many positives that came out of what at the face seemed like this is a huge failure. And really, it was setting me up for so much positive in the future, for humility on my part, and not be prideful and say, oh, well, you suck because you failed, or you quit, and just have that humility and say, all right, there are a lot of other people that are doing their jobs that make the thing that is in the headline possible, and do your best to appreciate them in that moment, even if you are the more star type person.
You know, you talk through this process, this happening, and the first thing that popped into my mind was Nebuchadnezzar. So here's King Nebuchadnezzar walking out onto the terrace and saying, "Look what I've created." Right? It's a pride. What
Yep.
happened? Immediately got this disease that caused him to walk around on all fours and eat grass, right?
Yep.
And for a year, if I remember the Bible story correctly, for a year he went through that. Tend to we tend to give ourselves credit through experiences that God created for us, through the experiences that God had prepared even before we were born that we were going to go through. Even as men of faith, we tend to say, look what I've created. I can't, another one of my jungle experiences, one of the reasons why I do what I do right now was in my experience was 2008. In 2008, I was fired from the best job anybody could have ever wanted in their life. Man, I ran a division for the largest company in the world. And I remember 5 months, 4 months, 3 months before, the pride that I had telling the president of our division what I thought and how I disagreed with what she thought, right? Pride comes before the fall.
Yep.
And so, those experiences, again, consider it a great joy.
Mhm.
So here's a question. So you talked a little bit about it, but be a little bit more specific about what did you feel? So all of a sudden, here you are. You didn't get to advance. You step back. You've talked about this. You took a look at the experience. You evaluated. You realized that you weren't as humble as you were supposed to be. How do you get yourself back on track and not give up, right? So even during the day, we're faced with battles. We don't want to attack them head on, and we find something to do that gives us a dopamine rush, so we feel better about the situation, right?
Yeah.
Growing up, my mom, whenever Bobby had a bad day, my mom gave me a popsicle.
Yep.
Right? That was our family's way of dealing with it. I've got other friends that were given a cookie. So we're faced with the challenge. We feel that we failed, or we didn't get over that obstacle. However you want to look at it, I'm going to retract and I'm going to look for that dopamine rush, right? Some people do it with food, some people do it with alcohol, some people do it with drugs, some people do it with pornography. I do it with YouTube shorts. I mean, I'm like, I need to feel better. I'm going to sit back. I'm going to look at YouTube shorts for a minute. So how do you get yourself back on track? And then how do people that they bump their head against the ceiling, they can't get through, they've got to regroup and do it again on a daily basis to get that grit back into your life and push through that obstacle? How did you do that?
So the big thing I've mentioned my wonderful wife. She told me, and I wasn't fully aware of it, like you were saying, that those months after, she's like, yes, you were a rain cloud for 4 months straight. So it was definitely not an immediate thing because I was walking around the same workspace watching all of my buddies proceed on with their careers while I was inventorying saws. It was a challenge, but what it really came to was after I had finished that pity party and talked with my wife and said, look, this is really where I think I should be. I think I need to get back into the game and then take that focus where, and maybe it was akin to what I had talked about in Buds. If you imagine all the things you're going to have to accomplish in Buds, if they would have told me at the beginning, hey, you're going to run over 900 miles in 6 months, I'd be like, well, that's not me. So that's totally overwhelming. Break it down. Okay, you're doing a 4 mile time run every Monday morning. It was that same type of mentality. Okay, I know, and it was a near term target of going back to selection the following spring. I need to be in the best shape that I can be. Okay? Well, when it was just me and my wife, she would encourage me, okay, making sure you're ready for the PT test, and then I was doing my own stuff as well. Okay, I had the opportunity to shoot. All right, well, I was shooting all the time that I could, and I ended up as one of the top shooters in my class of guys who are good at shooting. Learn what's going on around you. Okay, well, like I said, I got to know those people and how to function in that environment and get things done. So really, the key to it was figuring out what were the core tasks that I needed to be able to do and starting to link all of those together with that renewed effort. Having somebody on my team or in my corner, which was my wife at that time, having another buddy at work who was in the same position. We were getting ready to go back to selection together. We encouraged and challenged each other. And then all of that turns into the foundation that, like you said, you're bumping your head against that ceiling. Well, if your foundation is down here, you're never going to be able to reach that and break through it. But you build up, okay, everything that I can on my own, everything that I can do with the team that's around me, and then acknowledging and appreciating the others. Okay, well, now I'm here. It's just this small gap that I have to actually clear in order to break through that next challenge.
I like how you brought team back into it. You brought the team back into it, right? And as I hear that, there's so many things that I think about when I hear team, but we were created as relationship people. We need relationships. We need to help others. Others need to help us. What do you say to that person that has accomplished the fairly significant things in life, but they've done it as an individual? Mm-hmm. They haven't really put together a team. I like what Jim Rohn said. If you hang around 5 addicts, you'll be the 6th. If you hang around 5 millionaires, you'll be the 6th millionaire. Mm-hmm. So how do you encourage? Because the lone wolves are out there, right? You took the DISC assessment yesterday, and D is part of your personality. That D tends to be a lone wolf. Ds tend to think that I can, they have the Nebuchadnezzar complex, right? I can do it. I've done it. I'll battle through it. I'll do it. So how do you convince somebody that has that D part of their personality, the I complex, they're going to do it on their own? How do you encourage them to bring a team up around them?
The thing that I'll say is, after having achieved so much in my military career and then life beyond, when you get to that peak, do you want to be able to actually look around you and share that with anybody? Because you could eat an amazing meal, and if you're not sitting across the table from somebody to enjoy it with, it's a totally different experience. And so my hat is off to the guys and gals out there who have been able to achieve those great things on their own. That is not my story. My story is one of having other people that were around me that helped me succeed and that I helped succeed. And the satisfaction that I've got out of that outlasts whatever the rewards or prestige or whatever else. It's those friendships that are there at the end of the day that really count. And I think when you develop that team around you, they will be there with you when you hit that peak, and there to help encourage you out of those valleys even faster than you might have been getting out of them on your own.
The worst thing is being alone, right? Because being alone starts a downward spiral. And the longer that you're alone, the harder it's going to be to get out of that downward spiral. The longer that you're alone, the longer that you're in that downward spiral, the more opportunities you have to chase a dopamine hit. And that dopamine hit then just wants you to chase the next dopamine hit. And it's a spiral downward that some people can't get out of, right? Some people actually become a recluse, or some people actually over medicate to the point that they die. Some people just go out and commit suicide. The key is hang on. And again, that whole idea of locking arms, right? Who can I lock arms with? And it also, I think it comes to the point too now, who am I associated with? Is there somebody on my team that shouldn't be on my team? Is there somebody that I know that I should bring on my team?
Yep.
So how do you navigate that?
So that is, I really appreciate getting the opportunity to do those assessments that you sent over to me, because that was one of those things where it pointed out, for me personally, it's being an encourager. But then also that I'm not afraid to have that confrontational conversation, or critical conversation, depending on how you frame it, and saying, hey, these are the things that need to be happening. when you talk about the person that's not supposed to be on your team, it's it's maybe even more critical that you deal with that than that you're rewarding everyone around you. Because ultimately, when you keep that person on your team that is not a good fit, you're penalizing everyone else that's there doing the things that you're asking them to. And so I had that actually happen while I was in the military. One of the folks on my team wasn't doing the things. They had an attitude that was more adversarial, and when they were around, I guess I would use poison the situation is an accurate way to put it. And so when you have the opportunity to be able to say, this is your second chance, you need to correct this. Okay? No, you've not corrected this. Okay, this is the action that now is occurring based on your attitude, your actions, and your failure. Because if I don't do that, then everyone else, they're like, why should I even try? The rest of the team that is doing the right thing, why should I try? So I would say, yes, have that difficult conversation. That may be the avenue, the shock that that person needs. They go somewhere else, become a part of another team, and do well. You might be doing them a disservice by keeping them on your team when everybody hates that they're on your team in the first place. And then the inverse of that is those folks that are doing well for you, being able to appreciate them. And that's, I think, too, when you talk about a team, developing that, having a personal touch to things. So even if you're not an emotional person, connecting with your team, that was one of the ways that I did things. I knew who my team members, the guys and gals that worked for and with me, I knew who their family was. I knew who their kids were. And when we were able to celebrate wins, you do it in a totally different, a whole new level. And they feel valued. So I've gotten rid of the person who is dead weight, and now I have more bandwidth to be able to invest into these people that are giving return in the first place.
This part of this conversation leads me to this. I work with institutions and organizations. You work with institutions and organizations, and they hire us to come on board to help them create a culture, or help them develop a culture, or help them define their culture, or help them to fix their culture. How many of us actually spend time defining, growing the culture of a personal team, right? Who, here's who I am at work, here's who I am in life, right? We only, quote unquote, work 40 hours a week. The rest of the time we're going through life. And I've seen it, I've heard it, I've witnessed it. People say my family doesn't get the best version of me. My family doesn't get the authentic me. My family gets what's left over after all my energy is spent at work and the culture and the team that I'm trying to produce there, right? I mean, how much more should it be for us to develop, grow, and encourage a culture around us?
Yeah, that is the key thing and the elemental building block of being successful in the long term everywhere else. So, for my experience in the military, it was 10 years after that original enlistment when I thought I was part of the most elite thing that you can be in the military, doing all the craziest stuff that you can imagine, and I lost a lot of friends all at once. And those guys, in a military sense, were replaced within 6 months. On a family sense, no. There's no way to do that. And so, investing in your family, they are the ones who are going to be there when that train, whether it's the corporate train or the military train, rolls right on without you. As soon as you get off, it keeps on going. And having that tragic time when I lost all of those friends drove that home for me. And that was a turning point in my career where I started making decisions not on that goal of finding something that was going to be what I hung my hat on as far as being a man, but actually being a man and husband and father to my family. And then that shaped the decisions in the second half of my career that said, okay, my boss says, this is career suicide. You're sidelining yourself. Advancement is not going to happen for you if you do this. And I could see the opportunity was going to be better on me and hence better for my family, put me around, put me in a better state of mind because I wasn't under the same type of pressure. Thank God I made those decisions and my family got to benefit from that in that second half of my career. I think going back to what you originally said about culture, though, I did it in the military, finding culture. We had a conversation earlier. It was like, well, we know so-and-so, he's got kind of a foul mouth, but this is he's got all these other redeeming qualities. Okay, that's great. If every other word out of my mouth is a curse word, well, I'm not communicating as well as I possibly could. I saw this, a guy who I follow on LinkedIn, and he's a public speaker, a keynote guy, and he said, look, you can be a 10 out of 10 performance-wise, and if you're a 3 out of 10 communication-wise, people are going to judge you as a 3 out of 10. So I think for leaders, it's critical that you're developing your ability to communicate clearly. If I'm going into a meeting with you, Bob, and I'm like, great, I'm going to sit through another meeting with Bob. He's going to talk for 45 minutes, and there'll be 5 minutes worth of actual information communicated. This is the opposite of what we want as leaders. We want to be able to say, how do I boil this down to what people really need to know? What did Donald Rumsfeld talk about at my graduation ceremony? I have no idea. Maybe that's because I was a breacher and have had so many explosions rattling my brain for so many years. Or maybe it was because it wasn't clear. And so when we can clarify, that will help drive the culture around us. You can say, all right, figure out for yourself as a leader, what are the things that define me? Because unless I take the time, and it's effort, like we can just like, all right, every day we're doing the things that we need to do, but not sit down and take the time to say, all right, for me as Dan Gonska, what are the things that I want to say define me? All right, well, I want to be kind but dangerous. And all of the things that I'm doing, because I'm a Christian, they are going to try and mirror what I see portrayed by Jesus when he was on earth. So kind but dangerous. That's what I want to be. Yes, dangerous, well, the Navy SEAL part helps me with that. But kind, well, that's a little bit different. I'm using a priming bias as well, because I'm not saying dangerous but kind, because then it gets the wrong connotation. Kind, I'm soft at first, I can help people. I'm doing that because I know it's the right thing to do. I'm not nice. I'm not a nice guy. So these things that define me. I'm kind but dangerous. Yep, so I can help you. Humble but confident. All right, well, we're not doing what we talked about earlier, being prideful, looking down on other people. But at the same time, I'm not like, oh no, timid about things. No, I've accomplished many things by the grace of God and with the help of others. But I am very capable, and I have gifts in order to be decisive when the time comes. And then if I was going to say kind but dangerous, humble but confident, and then a third that I recommend people embracing is being relaxed but ready. If you've seen somebody who's in their first fight, they're going to be totally tensed. Then they don't strike as fast, they can't react as quickly. Being relaxed up until that point that you actually need to act is so critical that you don't wear yourself out. So if I'm in buds or selection or day-to-day in the office and I'm constantly worrying about things, that's wearing me down to where I can't perform in the key tasks that I'm actually needing to be focused on. So relaxed but ready when the time comes.
So I'm assuming you would consider those your core values.
Yes.
But I tell you what, so we've been chatting for an hour and a half. It seems like 5 minutes. We got through 25% of what we want to get through. So this is part one.
Okay.
This is part one. So we're going to do this again, no doubt about it. And we've got but here's as you're talking about your family, as you're talking about culture of the family, I'm going to give your dad a shout out here, right? I know your dad, I know your brother Mark, and I met your sister that lives in California. I met her recently as well. And I've told you that you're lucky to have a dad like your dad. We hear about this Gonska 100 and just the culture that your dad has created is pretty amazing. So let's close out. Let's close out with your dad. What a great mentor your dad was to you. This whole idea of the Gonska 100, the whole idea of the culture that he's created in your family. Well, I'll give you a couple minutes to talk about that and be proud of your dad. Let's hear what you got to say.
Yeah, I love that opportunity. So from the time that I was young, when I was 12, I think, I was first proud to have bought my own lawnmower. And that was because my dad, with 6 kids and a meager income doing job placement and writing resumes, taught me the value of working hard. And so I enjoyed looking back on it and saying, all right, the reason he had bloodshot eyes and coffee breath was because he'd been burning the double midnight oil providing for our family. He passed that down to me to where I was proud to buy that first lawnmower and then have that entrepreneurial spirit that was basically in the background and helped me do things outside the box through my military career, and then now is serving me well as I'm running my own company in Elite Shooting Solutions. The thing that he did legacy-wise, in addition to that, passing that on to me and my siblings, is the Gonska 100. So 11 years ago now, eldest son, who's now 15, was 4, and he asked him, hey, do you think I'm 100, Johnny? And he said, yeah, Grandpa, I do think you're 100. And so my dad took that instead of, I hear many people, oh, well, he thinks I'm 100. That's an insult. Well, no, he's 4. It's kind of a fun thing. He laughed at it and said, well, you know what? I'm going to ride my bike 100 miles every year until I'm 100. He's done it now for over a decade. That 4-year-old that I first started out on one of those little follow-along bikes now is riding with his 12-year-old brother on their own, racing off ahead, while I'm working to encourage my 8 and 10-year-old while they're on this adventure. And just like we talked about, when you say, I'm going to go 100 miles, unless you break it down and say, hey, we're at mile marker 6. 7 is not that far. Let's do that. Talk to me while we're going through this, son. It's given me an opportunity to help push my sons to be able to achieve more. Like when you say, hey, when you were 8 years old, you rode 50 miles one day and 50 miles the next on your bicycle. I definitely didn't do that. So then how much further ahead does that push this next generation that are my kids and my siblings' kids because of the effort that my father put into me and then now has opened up in something like the Gonska 100 for my family.
Wow, what a great legacy, huh?
Yeah. It is a privilege to be a part of the family.
So we're going to close this out. If somebody wants to get a hold of Dan Gonska, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
My website is eliteshooting.net, and the company is Elite Shooting Solutions. My email is just daniel@eliteshooting.net. So those are the best ways to get a hold of me.
Thanks for trekking with us on the Leadership Expedition podcast, where we don't play it safe, stay small, or stay silent. If today's episode sparked something in you, share it, and remember, leadership isn't a destination, it's a daring daily decision. Stay courageous, stay authentic, and keep leading like your life depends on it, because it does. Until next time, gear up, step out, and lead the expedition.